You know, 2 nights ago when I was sitting around the campfire and spoke with Paul for the first time, I looked at all the gentlemen around the campfire that are part of the M.A.B.R.C and the researchers, and there really are some quality men that are into this. And through a lot of sacrifice, have told their family, this is what I'm going to do, this is what has happened to me, I've seen this, I'm not going to hide it, I'm not going to play around with it, I'm just going to go out and look for it. And sometimes God suffers a little bit, sometimes friends call you crazy, family even calls you crazy. But these are some quality men, I'm proud to call them my friends. All right, the next speaker is Ron Boles. He is B.F.R.O of the Ozarks, lifelong resident and study of the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas and Missouri. Ron had his first encounter in '88 in Greene County. He joined the B.F.R.O as an investigator in 2007 and has participated and administered in numerous expeditions in many states. In that time, he has experienced and documented many sounds and evidence. Ron is an avid researcher in the history and ecology of Bigfoot, co-administrator of the official B.F.R.O Facebook and curator of the Missouri and Arkansas B.F.R.O research team.
M.A.B.R.T for having me here. Matter of fact, I'd sort of like to think, I think we ought to give them a good hand so far. I think this has been a great little conference going on. When I first showed up, I didn't have my hat on. A lot of people didn't recognize me, so behold the hat. The Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization has been established since 1995. It was by M.A.B.R.T. I came on it in 2007. My first encounter happened actually about 20 years previous to that. The reason why I chose this subject as my presentation, the ecological history of North American Bigfoot, I can show you plenty about what they do, and believe me, after following some of the fine gentlemen that have done the presentations before me, hard act to follow. So I don't have just what they do, I think it's necessary to understand why they do it. Next one, please. Hit that little square button, see if the audio comes on. And of course it don't. That's the reason why I went for backup. In the files that I downloaded. No. Ron Arkansas on it. And then go back to that screen as well. If you notice, oh, did it go away? If you notice, the house that was there, the human howl was a recording that I actually did in Arkansas of 2007. That I actually recorded. Oh, you got the volume all the way down. Oh, well. Anyway, the human howl. Anyway, the howls afterwards, there was 4 of them. Notice on the spectrum that it actually went up 4 at a time. And that was my first expedition. To me, it was an absolute adrenaline rush. But if you go on to the next one, we'll go to there. Here's the contents. I mean, I could go through the entire North American, but we're in the Ozarks, so I thought I'd center on that. So the next one will show a little bit of the Ozark history and Bigfoot.
All right.
And the relationship between the two. Go on to the next one, please. As you can see, the Ozark Plateau pretty much covers all the end. Yes, it covers even down there. Here I found is some of the names that the locals have called it throughout the years. Missouri, Alton Wildman, Beeman Monster, Beaumont Monster, the Blue Man, and Momo. Arkansas 8-Man, Boggy Creek Monster, Cash Swamp Wild Boy, Falk Monster, the Pig Woman, Swamp Stalker, and Womble. Oklahoma, a Skilly, a Dustin Honka, Finer Creature, Wild Man of the Tabletops, Washington Werewolf, Purcell Skunk Woman, Meeker Monster, Boggy Bottom Monster, Vicky Sewer Man, Wayne White Thing, Muddy Creek Monster, Green Hill Monster, McLean County Hill Beast, Woods Devil, Woods Demon, Lofton Werewolf, McCurtain Man Beast, Wilburton Gorilla, Oakwood Gorilla, Coleman 8, Canadian River Boogers, Cat's Head, Ozark Wildman, Black Kettle Creature, and Noxie Monster. A lot of different names, the reason why these names were put in here, Bigfoot and Sasquatch is relatively a new name. Actually, these names didn't come about, Bigfoot and Sasquatch really didn't come about until the mid to late 50s. The people, the settlers, had a name for these things way back when. The specific one that I know most about is the Blue Man of Missouri. That is around Douglas County, otherwise known as Booger County. The reason why they call it the Blue Man is because when it was solved during the daylight, it had sort of a blue sheen to it. Its fur was so black that it had a blue sheen to it. Matter of fact, there was such a rash of sightings during the late 1800s in that area that they actually closed down the schools and the church, and people weren't allowed to walk alone unarmed or by themselves. Next, please. Here's a difference on some of them. Of course, the original residents of this area, Delaware, Lampeg. Some of these names you'll have to forgive. I will not be able to pronounce them. But here's a different name. Now, there's plenty other Native American names on here, but I picked out just three, for example. And then you also had the early pioneers Bigfoot. Scott Irish was a boggle. That's the original, by the way, boggle, or the German, the boggleman, that's the original European term for booger or the boogeyman. Krampus, boggleman, M.A.B.R.T, which is Celtic for the gray man on the mountain. And the French was the Rougarou, and sort of a werewolf, Bigfoot type creature there. Next, please. The decline of North American forests. This is the reason why I believe, the basis of what I'm presenting. I believe, and this is my theory, that the North American continent today is more ecologically friendly than it has been in almost 200 years. And a lot of people say, well, how can that be with all the cities and the population and all that good stuff? Well, follow through with me and maybe I can sort of show you my way of thinking. Forests are a key element in the broad sweep of United States history. The forest landscape has changed greatly over time, as has public concern for trees, water, and wildlife. The conservation movement of the early 20th century and the policy changes that resulted from that movement have been leading factors affecting the forests of today. The single most important event in the evolution of the modern American landscape was the clearing of forests for agriculture, fuel wood, and building material. Think about it. Everything was based around wood back then. People depended heavily on the products of the forest, both in their personal lives and general economy. Wood was virtually the only fuel used in this country until the last half of the 19th century. Wood warmed people, cooked their food, produced iron, and drove locomotives, steamboats, and stationary engines. People used lumber, timbers, and other structural products as the primary material for building houses, barns, fences, bridges, and even dams and locks. These wood products were essential to rural economies across the nation, as well to the industry and transportation and the development of towns and cities. American forests, the products derived from them, and the land they occupied were, in a real sense, the economic foundation of the nation. Forests were also the habitat for the wildlife that supplemented the diet of millions of Americans for centuries. However, even more important to the American diet was food produced on the land cleared of its forests and employed for agricultural use. This was by far the primary cause of the forest loss. Next, please. Forests as presented in the United States during the 1600s. The blue is non-forested areas in North America. The green was forest land. 1,037 million acres. 2007, 12 million acres non-forested, 751 million. Okay? Remember those numbers. Next, please. Native Americans' effect on the American forests. One popular myth prior to European contact, America was dominated by impenetrable, relatively uniform ancient forests that cloaked the landscape of a long-term static balance with the environment. The reality was far different. Pre-European settlement forests were exceedingly dynamic and changed by minor natural and human influences, disturbances, catastrophic events that had a profound effect on the ages and species mix of both plants and animals. The diversity of forests and conditions that resulted from these influences was a major factor in creating the wildlife variety and abundance that so impressed the European settlers. Next. Here is a perfect rendition by a gentleman that was in the colony of Roanoke during the in North Carolina. As you see, this was not a European village. This was actually a Native American village. And they didn't have quite the growth, but you know, out there in that area, they still had their little mini farms. Go next. Here's what an Appalachian European farm looked like. It wasn't quite as uniform. Go next. Between 1850 and 1900, the population tripled from 23 million to 66 million. Even the bloody decade of the Civil War showed a 27% increase. Immigration added to the population growth amounted to 32% of the nation's growth during the last half of the 19th century. Increased industrialization might logically reduce a nation's demands on its forests. Coal replaced wood fuels. Objects formerly made of wood, such as buildings, fences, bridges, nails, and machinery, were increasingly made of brick, iron, steel, and other materials. In fact, industrialization in Europe was partly a response to the diminishing wood supply. In America, however, other factors were the driving force, including the improving transportation system and adoption of European industrial technologies. In the second half of the 19th century, extensive land was cleared for farming. During this period, while the U.S. population tripled, the total of area cropland increased by over 4 times, from 66 million to 319 million acres. That's a lot of wood. For every person added to the U.S. population during the 19th century, put another 3 to 4 acres under the plow. Except for the decade of the Civil War, the increase in the area cleared for cropland paralleled to the increase in the United States. 1910, farmers cleared out about 190 million acres of forest for crops and pasture, an amount greater than the total of the previous 250 years of settlement. In fact, the 60 years between 1850 and 1910, the nation's farmers cleared an average of 13.5 square miles of forest per day. Go next. This was northern Michigan. Where was the Sasquatch going to find refuge in that? Next. Then you have the decline of the wild game in North America. I found this picture and I thought this was a perfect illustration. I counted 17 deer at this hunting trip. During that time also there was venison, bear, what have you, was marketed like pork, chicken, and beef is today. You go to the grocery store, you buy a pound of venison if you didn't kill it yourself. Next. Deer. Unregulated hunting and habitat construction had depleted white-tailed numbers to the point that many biologists feared deer would soon be gone for good. In 1925, a state survey estimated Missouri's deer population at somewhere around 400. That number may have improved slightly by the time the Missouri Department of Conservation formed in 1937, but the population was still low enough that the chance of it being snuffed out entirely was an eyebrow-raising experience. Even when I was a kid, and I'm only 46 years old, seeing a deer was something special. Now you can't swing a dead cat without hitting one. In the Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, wild turkeys were found in large numbers throughout the state from 1840 until 1900. Historians report too many wild turkeys of it to consider raising as tame birds, and turkeys were so numerous and easily obtained as to be scarcely worthy of consideration. 60 years later, the Missouri population that had been reduced from 250,000 to approximately 3,000 birds. That's wild turkey. We're limited to remote Ozark regions such as Booker County. With the destruction of timber by fire and axe, open grazing of the forest, and market hunting, the wild turkey was brought to near extinction. Next, please. The 19th century witnessed a dramatic decline in the wild range of wildlife species. In the east, the once enormously abundant passenger pigeon was decimated by overhunting and loss of habitat. In the west, the buffalo was one of the most dramatic examples of a large number of wildlife population that by the last half of the 19th century had severely diminished. By 1890, people had eliminated the white-tailed deer from its range east of the Mississippi, including all the New England states west of northern Maine, as well as Maryland, New Jersey, Ohio, and most of Pennsylvania, and the Lake states, except with extreme northern portions of Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. No longer was wildlife abundant. The population decimated because of unrestricted market hunting of all kinds of wildlife for food, furs, and feathers, as well as habitat modifications used for farm clearing, logging, and extensive wildfires. Even many songbirds, such as robins and meadowlarks, were heavily hunted for food. I've just given you an example of, during that period of time, the decrease of habitat and the decrease in food source. Also, you got to remember, this was during the Industrial Revolution, so the water source wasn't that clean either. Next, please. The following snapshot of the nation's forest wildlife in 1900 helps frame. Wildfire commonly consumed 20 million to 50 million acres annually. That's the size of Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware combined. There was 80 million acres of cutovers that continued to be either idle or lacking desirable trees. The volume of timber cut emotionally greatly exceeded the forest growth. There was no provision for reforestation. Due to its abundance, wood was relatively cheap, and because of this, large quantities were left after loggers. Sawmills were inefficient. Use of wood in buildings was based on custom rather than the sound engineering, and huge volumes of wood simply rotted. Massive clearing of the forest land for agriculture continued during the last 50 years of the 19th century, resulting in forest loss. There was a time when we used to call the hills of the Ozark bald knobs. You know why? There was no trees. You can't. Some of this land, yeah, highly erodible. Formerly abundant wildlife species were severely depleted or nearing extinction. Among those were the white-tailed deer, wild turkey, pronghorn, moose, black bear, bighorn sheep, and bison. Fur bears, especially beaver, had been eliminated for a significant portion of their ranges. Next, please. Here's, for you Oklahoma people, here's another result of over-harvesting of the forest. It was called the Dust Bowl. Next. My beloved great-grandmother was born and raised in the Ozarks in Boone County, Arkansas. She used to make fun of me. Something awful. She used to, and one time she just flat out, she goes, "Now, Ronnie, I lived here all my life and never heard of him. Why is that?" Now, she was a child with depression. And I said, and I asked her, I said, "Well, Grandma, how many times did you see a deer or a wild turkey?" Of course, her answer was, "Hardly ever." Without proper habitat, food source, and clean water, then one must assume that Squatch's number dwindled or moved away. Now, here's something that I think, as the European settlers slowly moved their way west, that the Squatches slowly moved their way west and then found refuge in the northern Canada area and the northwest, which is California, Washington, and Oregon. Now, I'm not saying all of them went. There was still small numbers that hung around, but go ahead. But their numbers was dwindled. Now, here's the good news. The recovery of the American forests. And I'll go next. Large to do with that man right there, Theodore Roosevelt. President Theodore Roosevelt created 5 national parks, 18 national monuments, set aside 51 federal bird sanctuaries, 4 national game refuges, and more than 100 million acres worth of national forests. Those of us who love to fish, hunt, and cherish wildlife, wild places, and healthy watersheds owe a great deal to this great conservationist. Also, he is the only man of historic prominence that wrote of possible Bigfoot encounters. Coincidence? I'd like to think not. Go ahead. The Eastern National Forest went through, and I'm not going to read through all this, but the Eastern National Forest went through a great big conservation turnover. And this didn't happen overnight. This almost took 100 years to reclaim what was. We're still not where we were in 1600, but it took a great deal, and Theodore Roosevelt was part of it. And during the Depression, they actually did some national forests. A major acquisition of national forests during the Great Depression was examples of the Osala in Florida, Nicollet in Wisconsin, and Green Mountain in Vermont, and the Mark Twain in Missouri. Go next. The turn of the century also signaled a change in how people viewed nature resources. It became clear that the myth of forests and wildlife inexhaustibility was unattainable, and the existing ranges of forest and wildlife use and depletion was not sustainable. When approaches were called for, it was not clear how it was going to be done, but thanks to President Roosevelt and a gentleman named B.F.R.O, they developed the modern-day conservation movement. Next. So, here's the cropland, as you can see, back in the 1600s, and the estimated forest land. As the cropland rose, the estimated forest land decreased. Now, as you see at the far end there, it's starting to balance off. Next. It is a measure of both the inherent resilience of our forest and the success of the policies put in place to respond to public concern.
Which one is it?
After 2 centuries of decline, the U.S. forest stabilized about 1920 and is about 2/3 of what it was in 1600.
I got the titmus.
The area burned with wildfire has decreased 80 to 90%. Forest growth nationally has exceeded harvest since the 1940s. Today's harvest growth exceeds harvest by 40%. Because forest growth exceeds harvest, the average standing volume of wood per hectare nationwide is about 50% greater today than it was in 1952. Population of living wildlife has increased dramatically since 1900, but some species still have a concern. Next. Here's what, just to show just in the eastern, here's the increase of forested land just in, within 2007, and that's out there in the east. Next. Okay. You think you'll find Bigfoot in this landscape? Or do you, next? Or do you think you'll find it in that landscape? Which one? The second one, right? Next. Same place. Different time. 1880, 2000. Not that uncommon anymore, folks. Gives us hope as a squad. Next. Deer and turkey, recovery of them. Next. The halted marketing of hunting and wildlife for meat and most other products, and that's what my marketing, selling them at the local butchers, including feathers, and eliminated spring shooting of waterfowl and other game birds, established state regulations on resident game and non-game species, prohibited hunting of songbirds, twin birds, and other migratory game birds, non-game birds, and enacted federal regulations on sport hunting of waterfowl and other migratory game birds. Next. Here is an example, like I said, food source. 1930, that was the deer population in the United States. This is what it is in 2000. Turkey, damn near gone. 2000. Perfect example, and like I said, without the habitat, without the fresh water supply, and without the food, Bigfoot ain't going to be around. Next. Now, just an example, here's White River, Arkansas. This was a picture taken by a witness of mine on the game cam. There was 3 sets of pictures. Deer were eating, minding their own business, and then something popped up. Where's that? Something popped up right between these 2 trees, and that's what popped up right there. I have to blow it up. Look at it real hard. This is what I found next. Oh, well, you can't see through it, can you? Got the head, shoulders, and what really caught me is that. The eyes looking back out. That's spooky. It's a peeker, I believe that someone said. Next. The increase in sightings due to the improvement of report information that also due to the increased improvement of the habitation and potential of North American ecology. Since then, since 1800, now granted, we are in the age of information. But a lot of people say, well, how come there's more sightings now than there was then? One, more information is